This is what happens when you eat so much sugar the day before. Your brain doesn't work. But it does make you happy, right? Sugar makes you happy. How do you find happiness? We live near the happiest place on earth, don't we? What's it called? Disney. So here's the question. Does Disney make you happy because you give $100 to get in? No, it doesn't. That doesn't make you happy. What makes those attractions create that atmosphere of happiness is because that's where we experience, relationships and family and some fantasy, right? We go and we do those things, and as we're having those experiences, we start to feel happy because it's kind of like the world we would hope, or maybe we hoped would always be. Happiness feels great, doesn't it? It's hard to explain. It just feels so good to be happy, and we long for that feeling. We search for that feeling. And there's a few things in my life that bring that about. Friday night is my no rules night. And so if anybody knows me well, I try to eat really well all the time, except for yesterday. I try to eat really well. But Friday night is no rules. So that's our big date night, go out. And we go out, and I can eat anything I want, and I can have any dessert I want. It's no rules. And that kind of makes me happy, to have that time out. So I'll tell you what else makes me happy is when we have this place packed and the singing is so powerful. You can almost sense the Spirit of God is just moving in the place. And I'm sitting over there, and then I start to sense that. Man, that makes me really happy. But the best picture of happiness I saw yesterday. We had the big pumpkin festival, and over in the lot over there next to the church, we had the pony rides. If you want to know what real happiness looks like, there was a little girl, and I don't know if it's her first pony ride, and she's up on that pony, and she is just smiling because she's happy. So how do you define it? What is happiness? One writer says of happiness, no aspect of life is more desired, more elusive, and more perplexing than happiness. And I think that's right. He says people wish and they strive for what they believe. What we believe will actually make us happy. And then the guy gives a list: good health, attractive looks, ideal marriage, children, comfortable home, success, fame, financial independence. And that list, you could add to it. You could add your own bullet points to that list. It goes on and on and on. But he closes with this: not everyone who attains these goals, those bullet points in the list, actually finds happiness. And they did a study, and it came out to say unhappiness seems to be at least as prevalent as happiness. For every happy person out there, you can find another person that's unhappy. Now, the Greek word that usually gets translated as happiness is eudaimoni. Eudaimoni. And it's this sense of, that blissful experience. But when we translate those Greek words into English, if you've been worshiping here for a while, you'll know some of our translations don't seem to get the full impact of how it was spoken, what it was meant to say thousands of years ago. So today, that idea of happiness, the way it's translated from the Greek, it goes something like this. It's conceived of as a subjective state of mind. Okay, you with me? It's different for everybody. It's just a place where we find ourselves and we say we're happy. One person said, I saw this, they get that subjective state of mind of happiness is when they've been working in the yard all day long, really hot, and they go in and they get an ice cold beer and drink it. Except if you're Baptist, and you don't do that. So just know. Another said, it may have been yesterday. It may have been having a funnel cake. Who had a funnel cake yesterday? Okay, did it make you happy? So he's saying that's a subjective kind of experience of being of being happy. So who are the happiest people that you know in the whole world? Think of the people that you personally know. What is it? What are the characteristics of those folks that you go, man, they're happy. I want to be just like them. Well, for Aristotle, happiness is real different. It's not pleasure. It's not that subjective experience. And he says it's not virtue either. And when I read that, I went, I don't know where this is going. It's not happiness. It's not pleasure. It's not virtue. So he goes on to say this. It's the exercise of virtue. Now he's really losing me. I probably lost these guys over here because first of all, we don't like exercising, and we don't like exercising virtue because it sounds boring and bad, and something terrible is going to happen to me if I do it. Once more, he says, happiness is not something that even can be gained in a few hours. Like some kind of pleasurable sensation of biting into that crispy, sugary funnel cake. Now that's out the window. We can't even have funnel cakes because they don't give true pleasure. It's not happiness. So I don't know about Aristotle. You know what he says happiness really is? This will blow you away. For Aristotle, happiness is not that momentary thing that happens, that momentary subjective experience. It is the totality, get this, it's the totality of one's whole life that's been lived to the full human potential. And here's the catch, you don't know it till you get to the end. So you don't know if you've been really happy until your life's just about over. Does that sound would you like to sign up for that, right? I can't feel happiness. I won't know it till I get to that's what he says. We got to go through life, and we stop, turn back, and then we can look and go, I was happy, and I didn't even know it. Aren't you glad that we don't have to depend only on Aristotle for our definitions of happiness? There is someone, however, that had much more to say about happiness, and I think we can count on his words, and that would be Jesus. So if you would, I'm going to ask that you turn in your Bibles to Mark 12. I'm going to be reading verses 28 through 30. Mark 12, 28 through 30. Here we go. One of the scribes came near, and he heard them having kind of an argument, disagreeing with one another, and seeing that one particular person was answering well, he asked him, which commandment is first of all? So guy comes up, sees Jesus is kind of sounding pretty smart. He's sounding kind of like he knows what he's talking about. His thoughts may be dependable, and so asks, which commandment is the first of all? Here's what Jesus says. Jesus says, the first is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. You've heard that before. Love the Lord your God. We sing a song like that. Love the Lord your God with all heart, mind, soul, strength, right? So, several years ago, I did a little special digging into the Hebrew idioms, and especially what these passages mean. And as I said, sometimes when we translate ancient languages into modern languages, they lose a bit. So, when the fella asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? And then here comes the answer. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That word strength is very curious. In the Hebrew, it's meod, M-E-O-D, meod. And it doesn't just mean physical strength. It means your all, your everything. Love the Lord with all that you are, all that God has made you, everything. So here's the point. The first pressing, here's our Gethsemane. We're working through it. Next week is the last week, so if you're tired of seeing it, don't worry. So here's our Gethsemane. And so the first pressing of the Gethsemane is with our gifts, our meod, our everything. They're placed in there, and they're pressed in love. Jesus said, hey, here's the greatest commandment. Take all that God has given you and press it out in love. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't always live that way. And here's what I mean to say by that. We will try to put all kinds of things, as I said last week, into the Gethsemane of our life, our own press, and press on it. And here's the thing. We press on the very thing we seek. If you want to be happy, if you want joy, sometimes we'll load it in the basket for some reason, and we press on joy. We press on our joy. Now, I want you to think about that, because you're probably going, you've lost me now. What in the world are you talking about? We press on good feelings. We press on the pleasures. We press on these things, hoping that somehow by putting them in there and pressing down on them, we'll discover happiness. We'll discover true joy. Jesus says, no, you've missed the point. You're pressing the wrong fruit. Now, olive presses, Gethsemane's, here's your test if you've been listening for the past several weeks. What are these for? Come on, yell it out. They're for making olive oil. Absolutely. That's what this is for. It makes olive oil. Do we press olives thinking olives are going to come out? No. We're pressing olives so that olive oil comes out. We can't press joy and think joy's going to come out. It doesn't work that way. Jesus says it doesn't work like that. We have to press the right fruit. Putting joy in those baskets and squeezing the life out of it, what do you think that leaves? Where does that leave us? Lifeless. You ever wonder why so many people walk around just feeling lifeless? I'm going to suggest to you it's because they're putting their joy in there and pressing the life out of it, and nothing comes out. At least not what's supposed to come out. If you want this to work, you put olives in, you get olive oil out. It doesn't work any other way. Now, I talked to the kids today about gifts. And we see in 1 Corinthians 12, Paul lays out a long list of all kinds of gifts, a variety of gifts. He's saying God gives all of us, everyone here, a variety of gifts. That was my little illustration of the flashlight and the radio. They don't all look the same. They're powered by the same Spirit. There's a unity there, but we all have different gifts. And what we're supposed to do is put our gifts in the basket. Then you press in love. That's how we're designed to work. That's how you produce joy. And I want to prove this to you, just in case you think I'm making this stuff up. Okay, I want you to look at, or you can look on the screen actually. One verse, this is Psalm 45, verse 7. Just in case you think I kind of got wrong on this, you can check me out. Psalm 45, verse 7 says, you have loved righteousness and you've hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of what? Some translations say joy. The oil of joy beyond your companions. When we live the way God designed us and we press out in love, it says, God anoints you with the oil of joy. That's got my curiosity, because if you're like me, you'd love to have a little more joy in your life. You see it again in Luke. I think, Kara, if you could put this up. Luke chapter 6, 38. Again, you see this played out in the New Testament. 38 says, give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, interesting words, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. Do you hear these themes throughout the Bible? The pressing down, a response, a result of the oil of joy, a pressing down, shaken together, a good measure poured out. It's how we were created to work. Here's the point. If you don't remember anything I said today, remember this. Joy is a result of a loving pressing. If you press your gifts through love, the result is joy. If you do anything else, it's just crazy. It's lifelessness. You can't press olives and get olives. You can't press joy and get joy. But you can press gifts through love. And then you get joy. Then you get happiness. And it's not really a reward, but I think it's just a result of living our lives for God. And you can't get happiness apart from God. We're bound together. This whole idea is part of how God works, and we're bound to God. Happiness is inextricably tied to the commitments of our hearts. This results, if this is our lives, if our lives like a Gethsemane, a little bit of a theme I have going for the past few weeks, if our life's like a olive oil press, the commitment of our hearts, the quality of our gifts are what count. Now, in Luke 6, I'm not going to go into this today, but it's the whole list of the Beatitudes, the blesseds, right? Blessed are you if you're hungry. Blessed are you if you search for righteousness. Blessed, blessed, blessed. That word blessed is makarios in Greek. Do you know blessed and happy? Same word. When you're reading the blesseds, if you get tired of reading the blesseds, read them a different way. Happy are those who thirst for righteousness. Happy are those who are hungry now, they shall be fed. So, happiness, blessings. The result of pressing love, gifts pressed out in love, our time, our talents, put those in the basket. That's blessings. That's happiness. So what pressings do you give to the people that you care about the most? What do you give to? We try to give the best to our kids. We've always tried to do that. What blessings do you give to your relationships? What blessings do you give to the folks maybe in your work and how you're working? Have you ever gotten those crazy bad Christmas gifts? You know, one writer calls them rotten gifts. You ever gotten rotten gifts? Reader's Digest they asked a poll question they sent out, and they said, would you send us your stories about the most rotten gifts you've ever received from anybody? And there's 4 of them here. Julie from Iowa says, I once received a toilet seat. Well, for some people, that could be a really good, I don't know, but yeah, it sounds, Audrey from Virginia says, the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, but I was in high school and not even dating. That's a rotten gift. Clark from New Mexico. This is a 5th of whiskey, even though I'm an alcoholic. That's a rotten gift. Carol from Oklahoma. I got my own Christmas gift back that I gave last year. So that's that gift that keeps on giving, man. You can squeeze on that one all day and just keep running it around, right? You know, we laugh at that, but then I think sometimes I give rotten gifts because basically I'm a cheap person. If you ask my family, I'm cheap. People see me working around the church and I'm doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Oh, how wonderful Pastor Joe loves to help out. He's so skilled. That's not it. I'm cheap and I don't want to spend the money, right, Mike? I'd rather do it myself than spend the money. We bought the house here when we moved over, and it's a block house. I never had a block house before. Well, when you go to hang pictures on the wall in a block house, it's a little bit different than a drywall like these walls here. We just put a little nail in. You can't put a nail in a block house. You have to drill and put anchors. So I bring out my trusty drill, bought at a garage sale with the frayed little, electrical cord and all that, shocks you, wakes you up while you're working. So I go to drill, nothing happens. I go through a whole set of drill bits, nothing happens. And then I realized, they make a special drill to drill into concrete. It's called a hammer drill. Who knew? But you have to buy them. I couldn't find it at the garage sale. So I go to Home Depot right over here, and I bought a hammer drill. Man, like butter. Man, I was over there the other day hanging banners. Watch this. When you have the right tool, it's amazing what can happen, isn't it? And I've done the same at the church. I've done the same thing here as the pastor. Because I'm cheap, and I'm so cheap, sometimes I will do cheap things. Not quite rotten gifts, they're just cheap gifts. I will be cheap because I don't want to spend the money or burden the church, because I thought cheap was good stewardship. And you know what? I've learned cheap stewardship is not a good use of God's gifts. That's like you put cheap stewardship in here and squeeze on it, and I don't know what you get, but it's not very good. And I realized a few years ago that my cheap joy led to weak ministry. It really did. And I had to step back from that and say, wait a minute. If God is gifting us, if we have generous hearts in the church, I shouldn't try to do cheap stewardship. So you don't get happy. If you want to get happy, you're not going to get happy by keeping love and keeping our loving gifts inside. Happiness is linked to this process, resulting in joy. I'm almost done. There was a recent brain study, you'll love this, when it talks about generosity, that suggests that generosity makes the pleasure centers in our brain light up like a Christmas tree. Isn't that interesting? I thought, okay, let's read a little more. It says, multiple studies have also demonstrated that a phenomenon known as helper's high, which causes individuals aiding others to experience improvements in mood, immunity to certain diseases, and a general overall sense of well-being. And that's why sometimes just following your instincts for sympathy or generosity generally turns out to be a good investment in our own lives and happiness. That's a secular way of saying, put the right gifts in, squeeze them in love, out comes happiness. They just don't know how the Spirit works. So they give you a very, scientific brain analogy. Could it be God created our brains to work like this? And they're just identifying it? Now, we're almost done. Tara, if you all want to make your way up here. In Mark, in the 6th chapter, you hear the story of feeding the 5,000. I'm not going to go into that. But here's the point. They get to the point of wanting to feed a bunch of people, and the disciples go, Jesus, how can we do this? Send them home, let them go to the town, let them buy some food. We can't possibly take care of all these people. That's cheap stewardship, right? They're being cheap. They want some cheap joy. Send them out, Jesus. We can't afford it. So he goes, no, you go collect something. So they bring back the food, they bring back bread, and they bring back some fishes, right? And they go, really, Jesus? Really? These are rotten gifts. We will never place those in here and be able to feed all these people. Jesus says, no, it's enough. It's acceptable. So they pressed the gifts, not special gifts, just ordinary fish and bread. They pressed them, and what happened? It says 500 men were fed. That means there were many more people than that there. There were women and children also. The people were astounded. The disciples were astounded. And I think Jesus was happy. Do you think they were happy with using the gifts in that way? So how can we feed the mission of the church is the question. With our plain stuff. That's all we have. We have some plain stuff. And I think I made this point last week. Jesus can take even our plain ordinary stuff, our gifts, and can do amazing, wonderful things with them. When they're pressed out through our lives, in love, there's not only joy, but the feeding of the 5,000 says you're going to get a first pressing. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be good. It's going to be satisfying. And you know what? You're going to have leftovers. Remember when they collected up the fish and the loaves? There was a lot left over. It's amazing when we do this the right way. I encourage you to keep on pressing. this is, again, we talk about stewardship in the church one time a year, but I'm not talking about money here. I'm talking about who we are, and I'm talking about our desire for happiness and how we go to seek it. And the Bible says to keep on doing this. Psalm 92 says you have to keep pressing new and fresh, because the fresh pressings, the first pressing of the olive oil is very green. Green is newness, new life, new birth. So the psalmist says, keep pressing, continually pressing out that new life. So we're going to test this out next week, if you're ready. We're going to test out. I'm going to challenge you to consider your gifts. And we gave you some ways to respond. It's not exhaustive, but we gave you a time and talent sheet. We gave you a card to indicate how you might support the work of the church through your gifts. And I want you, next week, we're going to place them in the basket, figuratively speaking. And I want us to press in love what we have, our mayod, our all, our everything. Bible says strength. And I want you to place those gifts in the receptacle here, the bowl, as our first pressing. And then after you place that in there, I want you to go back to your seat, and I want you to take a second and see if you're experiencing happiness and joy. Because the Bible says if you do this, that's what you receive. Let's pray.